Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing well. Today I have a rare doula diary video for you guys. I do have a whole playlist out there talking about being a doula, but I don't film on this topic too often. I try to kind of separate my doula business from this business, but so far all of my clients have found my YouTube channels and my Instagram, so I've just decided to go ahead and post some more. So I actually reached my 5-year doula anniversary. I wish I had more experiences. I definitely don't have a lot between the pandemic and having a pregnancy and just taking a lot of maternity leave and time. Just when my business really started thriving, when I started getting emails, was around the time of us moving here, which I did take some in the pregnancy, but then that last one before I had Darian, I had two two births since Darian, and then the pandemic came when he was old enough. So I don't have that much experiences, but my experiences are very broad. I've seen a lot of different kinds of births, luckily. Today's video is going to actually be more designed towards people who have an interest in doulas, but also have an interest in possibly becoming a doula. So this is going to be pros and cons of being a doula. So I definitely wanted to just go ahead and give you guys my honest feedback and reflection of what it's like being a doula the last 5 years, and I'll probably make a video talking about whether or not I want to pursue being a doula or go into another kind of field at any point in my life. I'll probably film that after this, but today let's go ahead and just start with the cons, because I like to end on a positive, because there are so many positives to being a doula. Alright, so the first biggest con is witnessing violence in birth. Though I can definitely attest to vast majority being really lovely when it comes to midwives or doctors, sometimes you get some nasties, or sometimes you maybe even get a good one who's just in a bad mood. I think a lot of the time people who get used to doing their routine job, they sometimes forget that they're dealing with people in especially very vulnerable situations, and sometimes if they're having an off day, they'll just be kind of passive towards you, and even passive aggressive or physically aggressive. I won't go into too many details, but I have seen legs forcibly opened for a cervical examination without just saying, could we check you first? It's very alarming and unfortunate to see, and a lot of the reason why you go into becoming a doula, there must be something inside of you that wants to see women have more positive birth experiences and have more respect, and maybe you're aware of or experienced that in your own birth yourself. Navigating that situation can be actually really quite difficult, because you do need to be respectful and keep the peace in the room. That's a big part of your role, but it can be really hard to hold your tongue when you do see things that are just inherently wrong. The next one is actually quite obvious, and that is you have to know that you are emotionally adept to handle some very delicate and hard situations, and actually some really sad outcomes. Also in your training, you are likely to be taught how to communicate with women so that they are open with you, so that you can determine whether or not this woman was subject to any kind of sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, is in an abusive relationship or has been in an abusive relationship, which unfortunately so many women have at some point in their life. So you do need to learn some really special and specific ways to communicate, as well as even approach a woman in labor, because especially if you do suspect it, but nonetheless you should always just be aware that it's always a possibility. So you just got to be extremely mindful of every move you make, so not to approach a woman too fast from behind. Always ask for permission before doing anything. It can be a lot to take in, and it's really sad when you hear these stories, and it can be really actually quite difficult to determine whether or not someone has, and sometimes you will find out long after the birth already happened. And the stories can be so hard to listen to, but at the same time it's just so amazing that you've got somebody to open up about such a huge scar. So it's both a con but also a privilege. Alright, next one is being on call just sucks, and it's not something you realize until you've been on call for a few births. And when you're on call for more than a couple in a month or in a 2-month time frame or 3 months or however long you've done it, I haven't done it for more than 2 months, but it's a lot. You can't go more than about an hour away. Travel's out of the question, even longer day trips or hiking trips. You have to like openly communicate about if that's something you want to do. Sleep during on-call is just, for me, it's impossible to be honest, and this is probably one of the biggest cons for me when it comes to this profession. I absolutely can't. Like, I just have sleeping problems anyway, so to be on call and then to have to sleep with your phone, you like constantly get up to make sure you didn't miss something and make sure your volume's up on your phone, that your phone's plugged in, and you just get up all the time, like for the entire duration of however long you're on call. Some midwives that I'm friends with says that this does get slightly easier as time goes on and you just learn to nap and stuff during the day, but I'm a mom of 3, so I don't nap. But at some point it is supposed to get easier and you just get used to the unpredictable lifestyle. You have to get used to telling your kids, like if they have like a recital or something, you have to say, I might be able to be there, but I don't know that I can for sure be there. If you're on call in December, no Christmas for you. You know, you gotta go into the hospital, you gotta go to the hospital. All right, so that one kind of leads me into my next one, and that is that I think a lot of moms go into this profession. I think a lot of moms go into it because of A, passion, but B, also because they think that they're gonna have a lot of flexibility, because it's like being an entrepreneur and you can take on things as you think you can, but most of the time, I think that most people take on more than what they're ready for most of the time, and it's actually not that easy to organize being on call with kids. You need a backup for the backup for the backup plan. It's just a lot, so you need to make sure that you have like a regular care provider for your kids, and then you need, for this certain hour time frame, you can say, okay, if this happens during then, I'll call my husband and see if he can do home office, or I'll call the neighbor, or I'll call this babysitter, or you have 3 or 4 backup on-call babysitters, which are really hard to find. You need a backup doula should you get sick. It's always good to have 2 backup doulas actually, because there could be like a childcare issue on top of you being sick, and then the backup doula is either sick or has a childcare issue, and then you want a backup for the backup for the backup. Just always have a lot of backups. It's very stressful. You're always going to be on edge, and you got to like overly plan and overly think every day in every action of your life. I'd say like the vast majority of the time you're just thinking about going to the hospital instead of actually being in the hospital. Even then, still, when you are in the hospital, you can expect to be gone usually a minimum of 12 hours, but I reckon it's going to be longer than that, especially if you have a first-time mom. I have been gone the longest, 36 hours straight, with about an hour sleep in between. So very often, though not all the time, you will work some crazy kinds of shifts. You will often work nights. Women tend to labor. I find obviously everybody knows about the full moon thing. I do find that women go into labor more often during full moons, but nights especially, women go into what we call the birthing cave then, so it's very likely going to start at night, and you will usually most of the time I find that I'm calling for a taxi around 11 p.m. to 3 in the morning. It's pretty real. Like, most of the time women do go into labor at night. I also find the weekends tend to be a lot more likely. I feel like most of the clients I had actually did, which actually ended up working perfectly for me because my husband was home. And I want to talk about safety for doulas. So I do take taxis. So there's a lot of ways that it's difficult to be safe actually as a doula. So for me, it's usually just like 3 in the morning. I'm scared that I'm going to get some sort of taxi driver creep, because I had witnessed in Munich somebody come home and have a really nasty taxi driver who was like harassing the woman, and it's scary. Like, you just never know when you're gonna get a creep. And usually taxi drivers are always men. I do not drive at the moment, as you guys know, but actually I feel like driving after a 36-hour, I'm just gonna call it shift, is pretty dangerous. I don't think that's something I would do. I either take public transport if it's during the daytime hours or taxi when it's the late night hours where it's not possible. So I do carry with me in my pocket pepper spray. I know a few basic techniques should I need them. If you're taking a taxi or if you're walking from your car to the hospital, just be very aware. Always look really confident in yourself and like you carry yourself well. Even when you're super tired and groggy, always look awake and alert when you're walking back to your car. I don't have too many tips on staying awake while driving because that's not something I've had to do. I guess caffeine is a good way. I watch a couple of midwives and nurses on YouTube. They were saying something about like sucking on ice or chewing on sugar candy or just sucking on something apparently helps, especially something sweet or cold. Next big con is clients can overlap. So you run the risk every time you take clients, like usually, I mean, it could happen really anytime, especially if you have a mom going into premature labor that you've already had a contract with for a while. But usually, like you want to say, if you have more than one client per month, you run the risk of this happening. It seems like it's probably not going to happen. I always thought so, but then it happened to me. Next con is it can be really hard to turn off after you've come home from a birth. So you might be really tired, but you're going to be thinking and reflecting on this huge thing you just witnessed. You're probably going to overanalyze everything. At least I do. Everyone's different. Some people can just turn off, but you're going to be thinking about it for like a couple days, weeks. I still think about them a lot and think about a lot of the details. So even when you come home and you're really exhausted, be prepared to like think a lot about what happened and reflect, maybe journal about it. I do journal about it sometimes. That really helps, like getting it out onto paper, and then I can turn off a lot easier. And this leads me into my next one. So part of why you will have a hard time turning off is I think as a doula. So we take on like the emotional responsibility. So midwives do too. But especially I think when there's a doula involved, the midwife kind of realizes that some of that responsibility has been laid off of her somewhat. And also you're being paid to be the emotional stability point for the woman. So after the birth, if you feel like something didn't go right or she's not fully happy or she's having a hard time, it can be very easy to blame yourself. Don't blame yourself. Becoming a mom and becoming a parent, so also for the dad, is just such a huge adjustment, and it comes with so many ups and downs. Nobody is ever to blame for any of the unexpected ups and downs in parenthood. If something didn't go exactly to plan, you might blame yourself for it, and you might think, oh, if I would have done this, maybe this would have been better. You will run those scenarios over and over in circles in your head, but don't beat yourself up about it. It's just part of the territory, and it's okay to reflect, but try not to overanalyze it too much because you will make yourself crazy. The on-call and I think overanalyzing everything, which is good because you learn a lot through experience and through really thinking about things, but at the same time, I really think that's what leads to burnout. Last is it's just a very emotionally taxing job. You see couples at their absolute most vulnerable and on a positive highest moments, but also sometimes some of their lowest moments. And for a long period of time, you need to be able to remain calm, brave, collected, energetic, sympathetic. You're constantly okay, even though you might not always be okay. You might be really tired, you might really need to pee, which you do need to take care of yourself. A lot of midwives are so sweet and do remind us to go take care of ourselves because they see how much doulas do give to the birthing women. We definitely always put them over us or the couples over our own needs. You also really need confidence and courage to be able to really put yourself in somebody's intimate moment like that. I was pretty nervous, especially my first few times. I always have this huge rush of adrenaline, but even though you have the adrenaline, you need to make sure that you are not like giving that off. So I usually calm down after I've arrived, and it's the oxytocin in the room. I swear it just rubs off on you and you start to like chill out. For every birth, there's definitely like this big adrenaline, and just going in there, and just before you walk in the room, there's always this like, okay, so this is going to be big deal. I met this couple when we were just chilling and having a cup of tea. You get in and usually they're very welcoming and they're really happy to see you there, and the woman is often very relieved to have you there. And then you just kind of go into it and go with the flow, but it definitely does take a lot of confidence and courage to step yourself into somebody's intimate yet vulnerable time. Alright, so that was long. We actually have less pros, but the pros are more significant than the cons. So let's go ahead and get started. You literally get to witness seeing the miracle of life. Seeing the mom cry, the dad cry, you're probably going to shed a few tears too. I have definitely had my eyes water up every single time. It's a very personal job. Not too many jobs you just get to walk into people's lives and hear their stories. It's very relaxing. You go through a lot of interview processes, probably more than the average person does to find like one job that lasts them a few years. But the interviews I don't think are anything like typical job interview. They're much more casual. Of course you will be asked some factual questions, but if you're well prepared, it's no big deal, and if you're well educated, it's no big deal. But you get to learn about people's stories and how they met, and it's really fun for me because I'm an expat living in Germany, and I usually work with international couples who either speak English as a native language, or that's like their second best language. So I get to hear how these international couples met, just like we have, so we can really relate on that. So I've met a lot of good friends along the way too. You do have to be careful about how personal you get with your clients, but there's no problem within especially that moment just having a good connection and seeing as, you know, we could probably be really good friends because we have a lot in common. Another really big pro is the training is not long. It's not very expensive. You don't even have to really be trained. I don't recommend that at all, but you don't have to be trained to become a doula. And in my area, the pay is very, very good. So it did not take long for me to become a doula, and I get pretty good pay. It's unpredictable pay. You know, you have to get out there and find the clients yourself, or they come to you after recommendations, but it takes time. But once you get there, it depends on your area, but I find the pay is pretty good considering that it didn't take a lot to become trained. That's not to say it's an easy profession, just because the training and I guess the learning process is not that difficult. It still is a lot to take in, especially if you're new to all that stuff. Usually moms who become doulas aren't new to all that stuff and already did a lot of research in their own pregnancies. But if you're totally new to it, it can be very exhausting, and you may not even know what a cervix is. I don't know too many people who become doulas who don't know what a cervix is. So if you're starting from like square one, it can be a lot. But for the most part, if you're a mom who did a lot of research in their pregnancies, it's not like really mentally draining, I feel like, to learn. But that does not mean, like I listed all the things about the profession before, it doesn't mean it's an easy job. Another pro is I've always felt really like a part of the healthcare team. I have heard that some midwives don't like doulas. I've never had experience with midwives or doctors making me feel kind of unwelcome or like they didn't really know what my role was. Even if they didn't know what my role was, they would just ask really kindly and be quite interested, but most of them knew. Next is like a personal one for me, and that is that being a doula has really given me the opportunity to see how I feel about working in a hospital, because I've always had an interest in going into healthcare in some way. I've also considered dietetics, so it definitely gave me a little insight, and I actually loved working in the hospital. I hate being there as the patient, but I actually really like being in the hospital. I find it really fun and entertaining, and I always feel like I learn so much every time I go there. Also, as a doula, I was taught a lot about how to be part of a healthcare team. Don't get me wrong, birth is not a disease, but you still go into the hospital and there is still a team of healthcare workers taking care of you for the most part. They are looking out for the health and well-being of you and your child. The doctors have a different role to play, the midwives have a different role to play, the nurses have a different role to play. If you're a doula or the partner, you have a different role to play in that healthcare team, and of course, it's always up to the mom and the dad to confirm whether or not they want a procedure done, etc. In my opinion, the pros definitely outweigh the cons in the end. It's a pretty amazing privilege to be able to witness the miracle of life. I do really hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it interesting and helpful, especially if you've ever considered becoming a doula. But as of right now, I'm not working as a doula because it's still not really allowed here in Germany. Germany, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about being a doula at least for a little while. But yeah, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and I will see you next time.